Joe says to Jameer, "Thank you for inviting me to your party." How will Jameer reply? Will he say, "I'm glad you can come"? Or will he say, "I'm glad you could come"?
Luis supposes that the conversation is happening at the party.
Thank you for inviting me to your party.
Joe thanks Jameer for inviting him, and Jameer says,
"It's nice to see you again, Joe. I'm glad you could come."
To Ken, though, it sounds as if Jameer has met Joe and invited him to his party.
Thank you for inviting me to your party.
He hasn't seen Joe for a while, so he says,
"It's nice to see you again, Joe."
He's glad that Joe will be able to attend the party, so he says,
"I'm glad you can come."
Doesn't it depend on when the conversation's taking place?
That's right. If you don't know the context, you can't answer the question.
As language teachers, we need to be especially careful about saying that something is wrong unless it is actually grammatically incorrect. As long as it's grammatically correct, then almost any expression can be used if we can find the right context for it. And as language learners, we need to be aware that something that is incorrect in one context may perfectly well be correct in another context. In this case, the typical context would probably be for the host to welcome a guest at a party. And in this case, the host would say, "Oh, I'm glad you could come." But if someone accepts an invitation to a party, then it's also perfectly possible for the person who makes the invitation to say at that time, "Oh, great, so you can come. I'm glad you can come." The basic difference would be the time frame. Could would be used after the person has arrived at the party, and can would be used when we're talking about the party before it's happened. And one more thing. Students are often taught that we use was or were able to for ability on one specific occasion in the past. Like, I took a sleeping tablet, so I was able to sleep well last night. And that we only use could when we want to talk about general ability in the past. For example, when I was a child, I could run for miles. But what about this case? It seems perfectly natural to say, "I'm glad you could make it," even though it shows ability on one occasion. Clearly, the reality is rather more complicated than the grammar books are telling us. For more information on this topic, click the video link at the end of this video.